Ever wonder why your grandpa's still kicking at 90 despite his love for 70s junk food? It's not just good genes. We're about to uncover the shocking truth about those classic treats that should have sent him to an early grave. From space food sticks to Dolly Madison Googles, we're diving into the wildest, most dangerous eats of the disco decade. You won't believe what we used to put in our bodies and how we lived to tell the tale. Remember those vibrant JellO salads that graced every potluck table in the 70s? Those wiggly, wobbly towers of artificially flavored gelatin weren't just a treat for the eyes. They were a glimpse into the future of food, but not in a good way. The 1970s ushered in an era of what we now call food-like substances. These were products that looked like food, sort of tasted like food, but were far from the natural, wholesome meals our great-grandparents would have recognized. And those colorful JellO creations? They were the poster child for this new wave of synthetic cuisine. Let's take a closer look at what was really in those jiggly molds. The artificial colors that gave JellO its eye-popping hues weren't just harmless dyes. Many of them, like Red No. 2 and Violet No. 1, were later banned by the FDA due to their potential health risks. But back in the 70s, we were blissfully unaware as we shoveled spoonfuls of these rainbow concoctions into our mouths. And it wasn't just the colors. The artificial flavors in these gelatin salads were a chemist's playground. Ever wonder why strawberry JellO tastes nothing like actual strawberries? That's because it's a cocktail of chemicals designed to trick your taste buds. These lab-created flavors were cheaper and more stable than natural ones, but our bodies weren't equipped to handle them in the long run. So, what happens when you regularly consume these artificial additives? It's not pretty. Studies have linked some of these substances to allergies, hyperactivity in children, and even certain types of cancer. But in the 70s, we were more concerned with convenience and novelty than long-term health effects. And JellO salads were just the tip of the iceberg. The 70s saw an explosion of processed foods that were packed with artificial everything. From Tang, the powdered orange juice that supposedly went to space, to Cool Whip, the whipped topping that's more chemicals than cream. We were slowly replacing real food with imitations, and our bodies were paying the price. But here's the kicker. Some of these beloved 70s snacks were so artificial, we still don't know exactly what's in them. Take Twinkies, for example. This golden snack cake became such a cultural icon that its supposedly infinite shelf life became urban legend. But the real mystery? The exact recipe for Twinkies is still a closely guarded secret. We know it contains things like polysorbate 60 and sodium stearoyl lactylate, but the full list of ingredients remains locked away. It's wild to think that we were regularly eating foods with unknown ingredients. But that was the 70s for you, a time when the novelty of food science outweighed concerns about what we were actually putting in our bodies. As we move on to explore the heartier meals of the era, keep in mind that the artificial trend didn't stop at desserts and snacks. The main courses of the 70s had their own secrets, and some of them might just shock you. From mysterious meat products to casseroles loaded with canned soups, we're about to dive into the world of 70s dinner tables. And let me tell you, what we find might just make those JellO salads look like health food in comparison. Think you know everything about 70s food? Get ready for a meaty revelation that might just turn your stomach. We're diving fork first into the era's most popular dishes, and what we uncover might make you think twice about recreating Grandma's famous recipes. But don't worry, there's a surprising twist to this tale that even the most devoted carnivores won't see coming. The 1970s weren't just about JellO and artificial flavors. This was the decade when meat took center stage on American dinner tables. Dishes like chicken Kiev, Salsbury steak, and fried bologna sandwiches became household staples. It was a time when a meal without meat was barely considered a meal at all. Take chicken Kiev, for example. This buttery bombshell of a dish epitomized the 70s approach to cooking. A chicken breast stuffed with herb-infused butter, then breaded and deep-fried to golden perfection. It was a heart attack on a plate, but boy, did it taste good. The rich, garlicky flavor masked the fact that you were essentially eating a stick of butter wrapped in chicken. Then there was Salsbury Steak, the working-class hero of 70s cuisine. This wasn't your high-end filet mignon. No, this was a patty of ground beef swimming in a sea of gravy. It was cheap, filling, and oh so satisfying. But beneath that savory exterior lurked a host of health concerns that we were blissfully ignoring. And let's not forget the humble fried bologna sandwich. This lunchtime favorite featured thick slices of processed meat, pan-fried until the edges curled, then slapped between two slices of white bread. It was a far cry from today's artisanal deli creations, but it hit the spot for millions of Americans. But here's where things get dicey. These beloved meat dishes weren't just indulgent, they were potentially dangerous. The processed meats of the 70s, like bologna and hot dogs, were loaded with fat and preservatives. We're talking levels that would make a modern nutritionist faint. These meats weren't just unhealthy, they were setting the stage for a health crisis that would unfold in the coming decades. And it wasn't just what we were eating, but how we were cooking it. Deep frying, a favorite method of the era, turned already fatty foods into calorie bombs. That chicken Kiev? The deep frying process added even more fat to an already indulgent dish. We were essentially doubling down on the health risks with every crispy golden bite. So, which of these meaty marvels was the worst offender? Brace yourselves, because the answer might surprise you. It's not the obvious cholesterol-laden suspects like chicken Kiev or the fatty Salsbury steak. The real silent killer of the 70s meat scene was beef stroganoff. Yes, that creamy, beefy comfort food was packing a serious health punch. The combination of red meat, sour cream, and butter created a perfect storm of saturated fat. And let's not forget the white pasta it was typically served over, adding a hefty dose of simple carbs to the mix. It was a dish that exemplified the 70s tendency to favor rich, indulgent flavors over any semblance of nutritional value. But here's the twist in our meaty tale. Not all 70s food trends were bad for your health. Amidst the artery-clogging main courses, a few dishes hinted at a more health-conscious future. Take pasta primavera, for instance. This colorful dish, loaded with fresh vegetables, was a rare beacon of nutrition in a sea of processed foods. It signaled a growing awareness of the importance of fresh ingredients, a concept that would gain traction in the decades to come. Remember when low fat was the ultimate health claim? Turns out, we might have been better off sticking with our beloved beef stroganoff. Get ready to discover how the 70s health food craze led us down a sugary path of deception. The 1970s weren't just about indulgent, meaty dishes. This was the decade when health foods burst onto the scene, promising a slimmer waistline and a cleaner bill of health. Suddenly, grocery store shelves were lined with products boasting low-fat labels, and diet culture took America by storm. We thought we were making smarter choices, but oh boy, were we in for a rude awakening. Here's the kicker. Many of these so-called healthy options were actually wolves in sheep's clothing. Take low-fat yogurt, for instance. It sounded like a dieter's dream, right? Well, hold on to your spoons, folks, because here's the scoop. That healthy yogurt often contained more sugar than its full-fat counterpart. Yep, you heard that right. In a misguided attempt to make up for the loss of flavor when fat was removed, food manufacturers went on a sugar-adding spree. And it wasn't just yogurt. Low-fat salad dressings, another 70s health food darling, were often loaded with sugar to compensate for the missing fat. We thought we were being virtuous by drizzling these over our salads, but in reality, we might as well have been pouring liquid candy on our greens. So, how did we end up in this sticky situation? It all boiled down to a massive misconception about nutrition. Back in the 70s, fat was public enemy number one. We were convinced that fat was the root of all dietary evil, responsible for heart disease and expanding waistlines. This led to a nationwide obsession with low-fat everything, from milk to cheese to those infamous Snackwell's cookies that would hit the scene in the following decade. But here's the real shocker. While we were patting ourselves on the back for choosing low-fat options, we were unknowingly contributing to a health crisis. The rise of processed, Health foods, packed with sugar and unhealthy additives, played a significant role in the increasing rates of obesity and other health issues that we're still grappling with today. Now, you might be wondering which health food was the biggest offender of them all. Brace yourselves, because the answer might just shatter your nostalgic food memories. Remember those diet TV dinners? The ones that promised a full, satisfying meal for just a fraction of the calories? Well, they were often so low in nutrients and high in sodium and preservatives that you might have been better off with a full-fat, home-cooked meal. But the real cherry on top of this nutritional disaster Sunday was the explosion of fad diets. The 70s saw the birth of some real doozies, like the Scarsdale diet and the Atkins diet. These extreme eating plans promised quick weight loss, but at what cost? They often led to nutritional deficiencies and were about as sustainable as a chocolate teapot. As we look back on the health food revolution of the 70s, it's clear that we were well-intentioned but seriously misguided. We swapped natural fats for artificial sweeteners, whole foods for processed alternatives, and balanced meals for restrictive diets. The legacy of these choices continues to influence our eating habits today, with many of us still struggling to untangle the web of nutritional misinformation spun during this era. But wait, if these foods were so bad for us, why do we still find ourselves craving that gooey cheese fondue or those colorful gelatin salads? The answer might surprise you, and it has everything to do with your brain's reward system. Get ready to uncover the science behind why we can't seem to shake our love for these classic comfort foods. Let's talk about comfort foods, those dishes that wrap us in a warm, fuzzy blanket of nostalgia. You know the ones. Maybe it's mom's meatloaf or grandma's apple pie. These aren't just meals. They're time machines that transport us back to childhood, family gatherings, and simpler times. It's no wonder we're drawn to them, especially when life gets tough. But here's the kicker. While these foods might soothe our souls, they're often waging war on our waistlines. Now, let's dive into the science behind our cravings. Those high-fat, high-sugar foods that dominated the 70s, they're like kryptonite for our willpower. Studies have shown that these foods trigger a release of dopamine in our brains, the same feel-good chemical associated with pleasure and reward. It's no wonder we keep coming back for more. Our brains are literally wired to want these foods. But it's not just about the chemical rush. The food industry of the 70s was smart, maybe too smart. They figured out how to push all our buttons with their marketing tactics. Remember those brightly colored packages and catchy jingles? They weren't just fun and games. These strategies were carefully crafted to make us crave their products, creating a perfect storm of nostalgia and addiction that's hard to resist even decades later. So, which 70s foods are still holding strong in our hearts and grocery carts today? You might be surprised. Despite all we know about nutrition, cheese balls still make appearances at parties. Fondue nights are enjoying a revival. And let's not even get started on the enduring popularity of TV dinners, albeit in their healthier, modern incarnations. But here's where things get really interesting. There's a surprising connection between those 70s food trends and our current obesity rates. The addictive nature of these high-fat, high-sugar foods, combined with the emotional comfort they provide, has created a perfect recipe for overconsumption. We're not just eating these foods occasionally for nostalgia's sake. For many, they've become go-to comfort foods in times of stress, perpetuating a cycle of emotional eating that's hard to break. As we prepare to wrap up our journey through 70s cuisine, it's clear that we're dealing with a complex legacy. These foods offer a taste of the past and a hit of pleasure. But at what cost? We're left with a challenging question. How do we honor our food memories and satisfy our cravings without sacrificing our health?